Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here. Welcome to another video. This one came about because of a comment that was posted on the last Diatom filter build I did. A gentleman mentioned that he not only added Diatom powder to his filters, but he also added a powdered carbon. And what would happen then, besides getting the fine particulate filtration, he would also get some chemical filtration, and I thought that was a kind of a cool idea. Now I wanted to modify the other Diatom anyway, because it was a bit bulky, so I wanted to make it a little bit thinner. And so what I wanted to do as well, in this case, is add a system for adding a granular carbon. The standard one that you always get, the little pieces about the size of a pea. Now, as I go through the explanation for this, I want you to keep in mind an old game. The game was called Mousetrap. You'll understand as I go along, but for those of you who know what the game is, well, I'll explain at the end. So what I'm going to do here is, this build is almost identical to the old one, except it's going to be 5-inch tubular acrylic instead of the 6, so it's a bit thinner, and therefore I'm going to have to make the holes are going to be a bit smaller, and also I have to add a third hole, and that third hole is where the carbon's going to be added. So the two at the top there are going to be where the plumbing is going to be, and the bottom one is going to be where the carbon is going to go. And as before, I have to widen the holes for the part that's going to be attached to the actual filter itself, so that the other fittings can fit through it. And I don't have a very good 1.5-inch hole saw. As you can see, there's a wobble to it, and it's not very sharp. And as it goes through, it melts. This is really irritating. I like the smooth finish to the other holes, but unfortunately, buying good quality drill bits that go beyond the inch get quite expensive. And at some point, I'm going to have to invest in some quality hole saws. I mean, these ones are fine for wood and that sort of stuff, but when it comes to something like this that melts quite easily, it just doesn't form as good a hole. And you can see here, this is what comes out of the hole saw when you're done, and you can see the outside's all, well, it's pretty much solidified, melted acrylic, whereas the inside is really nice and smooth. Which these are the nice holes, and those are the ugly ones. It's actually not that hard to smooth them out a little bit. Like I said, you take a utility knife here and just go around the holes and clean them up. But even still, it's just not as nice. So enough of that. What I'm going to do here is, this is going to be the delivery system. So what I did is I took a bunch of the square acrylic as before, put a 1-inch hole through the center of it, and made a bunch of cylindrical pieces that are going to fit the tube. And then what I'm going to do is I took one of them, I cut it in half, well, roughly, as you can see, so it's quite rough here. And now I'm going to mill it down so that it's going to form 2 half moons, and that is going to be the channel where the slide's going to fit through. That's going to allow me to prevent and then allow it to enter the carbon. You'll see as it goes along. It's kind of hard to explain without actually getting to see it. So all I'm doing here is I'm milling this down. It's actually easy to do, and it always turns out parallel because they're half circles. So even no matter what fraction of it you use, it'll always be parallel to each other, which is really kind of cool. Now I have to take this down a bit more, and I am going to smooth that out a bit, but it is quite a nice finish. So I made these so that they're just ever so slightly thicker than 1/2 inch, and they're going to sit on, well, the curve matches the other one, so you'll see there's a little bit of a wiggle there. That's the wiggle I want so that the slide will go through it. And then they'll sit on either side of the hole, and I will add in, well, you can see there, I was originally going to use the thinner piece of acrylic for this, but I decided it was a bit too much give for it, and it was just too sloppy, so I ended up using the thicker one, the 1/4 inch. So these are going to fit on either side, like that, so that's easier to see. And then I'm going to cut a, well, it's 1.5 inches, so it's going to fit inside there, and it's going to slide back and forth, and it's going to have a 1-inch hole. So It'll become more obvious, but that's what the channel where the delivery for the carbon is going to be. So all I need to do is take a piece of regular 1/4 inch, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to machine it down so that the sides are actually parallel. I meant to show you the clip of me doing the first side because no matter how well you adjust your table saw or whatever you're going to use, it's never quite perfectly parallel. And so what I'm going to do is I wanted to show you that you start trimming one side and then you don't get the it doesn't go all the way across, you don't cut the whole side, but unfortunately I forgot to turn the camera on. Anyway, so what I've done here is I've paralleled that up and I've cut it so that it is a friction fit. I will trim it down later, but what I want to do is I want it to fit. I want it as a guide for me when I attach this attach the 2 half moons. So it's going to fit in like this, the top's going to go on, and then it's just going to slide just like, there we go, there you go, it's going to slide back and forth like this. So that'll be what keeps the carbon out, and then I'll slide it forward where the hole is, and then the carbon will drop down into the system. This was a very finicky process, getting the first one in place. I'm not going to show you all of it. It went on for about almost 10 minutes, I think, and then it's just a matter of simply gluing it on. But the first one's really kind of critical because it is, well, the guide for the rest of this. So there you go, it fits like that, and now I'm going to use this as the guide. So what I'm going to do is flip it over, put that piece on, and again, with lots of patience, I'm going to get it so that it is parallel to all sides, so it fits nicely. And then I'm just going to tack it ever so gently with methylene chloride, and then I remove it and glue it on properly. So there you go, it travels nicely, and then put that on. So now the next step is to put the top on. And once the top is on, this is actually going to be a very snug fit. And then what I'm going to do then is, because I can just put it right back into the milling machine and trim it down, it'll fit quite smoothly. Actually, the neat thing about this is if I had have milled that properly the first time, the hole would have been in the dead center and I would have to take a very fine amount off both ends. But my machining skills are not the best, so it turned out that one side was a couple thousandth of an inch thicker than the other, so I only ended up having to trim one side, but that was not planned. That's just the way it ended up turning out. So this is the first. I've just glued it on now, so it's formed the sandwich that they need with the slot, and now this is where the tray is going to fit in, and it is actually really quite tight because, like I said, I wanted it to make sure everything was fit properly. And then I put it in the milling machine. I trimmed it down, made it nice and parallel, and then of course it just fits nice and smoothly in with a bit of friction. You don't want it to go too easily, but there you go. So that's all set now. All I need to do is add a cylinder to the top of this, and then put a cap on that. I didn't show you any of that because it's the same machining I've done for all the other ones. So this is the knobby handle bit is a little thick because I only have the only solid acrylic I have is all the same size, and I just machined it down. I mean, it is a lot bigger than it needs to be, but I didn't really want to go out and buy an extra acrylic rod just for this. So there you go, that fits on there, and then that's going to be glued to fit on top of this, and then that is the carbon delivery system. And that's what I meant by a complicated mousetrap type thing. It's just a lot more work than I needed to do. And the funny thing is as I was going along, that game was just going through my brain, and it's like, all right, this is just silliness. I'm making this way more complicated than I needed to do, because on top of that, there's also another little 1-inch acrylic pipe that fits in there as well to keep it in place, so it fits over it. And it's just way more than it needed to be. So here's the filter all assembled. That's all exactly the same as the other one. And I'm just going to put the carbon in here, and I'm going to fit it on top. And we're going to fire this sucker up and see how well it does. So I'm not just putting a little bit of carbon in. I just wanted to see how it will work. Obviously I could fill it up all the way, but like I said, this is just a trial run. So that's going to fit there, and that fits on top of there with the little adjusting pipe. And then it's a matter of now of plugging this thing in, adding diatom powder, and getting it working. So here we are. This poor tank, I've added more algae, as you can see, and here's the diatom powder. It's all running now, and you'll notice that the carbon delivery system I added is not there. It's actually at the end of this pipe. I made the adjuster pipe way too short. I made those pipes that feed the water into the filter too tall, whichever way you want to look at it. But this is late last night, and I just didn't have time to go do it. So I just put it on a pipe. I didn't even bother cutting the pipe down to the right size. I just left it long, put it on, but there you go. That's how it works. Just tap it, and eventually it all falls out. Because it has a square bottom to it, it doesn't go right away, but it all does get there. And there it is there, churning around like it's supposed to. Like I said, made it way more complicated than I need to do. And the funny thing is, as this got to this point, I said, well, all I need to really do is, well, I'll unplug it, and then everything will fall down. Then I'll just turn it back on. And then the diatom powder will attach to the mesh as it always does, and the carbon will just bounce around. And I didn't need to do any of it. All I needed to do was, when I charged this filter, is just put carbon in the bottom and then do everything else as I did before, and then there you go. You have a diatom with carbon filter in it. Anyway, I'm going to do one final clip here showing you what this looks like after it's done its job. Also, a couple other things occurred to me as I was watching this churn around. First off, as the diatom powder plugs up a bit, the current slows down, and therefore the carbon just piles up in a corner, and it doesn't do as good a job as it could. And the other thing is I thought of a much simpler way of making this work. I will show you all that tomorrow because I ran out of time. I didn't have enough to do this video and do the draw, so I'm going to give you a bonus video this week. I'll show you the simple solution, and I'll do the draw. So as you see, the diatom works really well. Whether or not the carbon works well is a question for another time, because I find carbon works really great in the terms of days, whereas diatom powders work great in terms of hours. But like I said, that's something for another time. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this style of video, please like and or subscribe. And as always, thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.